So anyway, yeah, let me just tell you about the moon trees. And I usually, when I talk about this, I like to start with how I first got involved with it. And that was with the simple email. So I am at the NSSDCA. It's basically one of NASA's deep archives for their spacecraft data, and I'm in charge of the planetary and lunar data. And in 1996, this was, fairly early on in the World Wide Web, before it had really been a big deal. But we had pages, a lot of pages up there on Apollo, because we had all the data from Apollo, the photography, and a lot of the other instruments data. And so our name, our contact information was on a lot of Apollo pages. And apparently this third grade teacher, Joan Goebel, came across our pages, and and she was doing this project with her class on local trees, and they had a tree that had a sign on it. It said a moon tree, and it was at this Camp Koch Girl Scout camp in Kennelton, Indiana. And she wrote to us, and she said, "We don't know anything about these. Can you tell us what a moon tree is?" And well, I never heard about it. Moon trees. And everyone I asked, including a lot of sort of the old timers that worked at Goddard, we had a lot of people who worked on Apollo and were involved with the Apollo missions, scientists and engineers. No one had heard of it. So I said, all right, well, I get a lot of odd emails, but I sometimes there's just did we really end on the moon? This is a hoax, or is the Earth really round, or is it flat? And but this one was interesting because I'd never heard of these, and it sounded like, wow, this sounds kind of legitimate anyway. And so I decided to look into it. Well, I went around on the early web, and I found a little bit. I contacted the NASA History Office, and they sent me a few clippings that they had in their files, and they didn't know much about the moon trees, but they did have these a little bit. And what I'm showing you now is some of the stuff that they sent. And so the story sort of started coming together a little bit. Well, and as Eric said originally, right, turned out Stuart Roosa, who was the command module pilot for Apollo 14, had brought all these tree seeds with him on the mission. Now he wasn't actually one who went down to the moon. He was in the command module. He was the Michael Collins for Apollo 14, where he stayed in the command module. And but he brought these tree seeds with him. And what I'm showing you now is this is one of the official pictures from Apollo 14. So that's Stuart Roosa. And the bag is what was called his personal preference kit. So each astronaut was allowed to bring a small canvas bag, very, very small, very lightweight, of things. A lot of them would bring coins or souvenirs or maybe photographs of their families and things like that. And by the way, the one I'm showing here is Michael Collins' personal preference kit that he carried with him on Apollo 11 and is now at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. But they each had a bag just like this. And Stuart Russo brought tree seeds with him. So I got back to Joan Goebel, who actually, after all these years now, this was 1996. We're still in touch, and it's been actually great. I told Joan what I found about it, but then I started thinking, well, this is such a great story, and no one seems to know about it. We have web pages about Apollo at the time, so I said, I'm gonna write what I know, which wasn't a whole heck of a lot, but more than it seemed like most people knew, and make up a web page and just tell the story as I knew it. And I also just made a list of the moon trees that I knew about. And this is a copy of one of the earlier pages, and you can see there's just not a whole heck of a lot of moon trees, but I put down what I could find at the time, and I put I would put for each page, I would put a little blurb about the tree, any information at all that I had on it, and all. And I put a thing at the bottom of the page, and it said, "Oh, if you know anything about a moon tree, you know, send me an email." And I just left my email address there. And I started getting emails, and I just started getting people saying, "Oh yes, we have a tree. It says it has a little plaque next to it. It says it's a moon tree. It's in the local park here, or it's at the state capitol building, or whatever." Well, I started putting this together, and it turns out there were a lot of moon trees all over the place. And along with that, I started hearing from people who were in the Forest Service who stumbled across the page, and people who were, well, even Stuart Rousa's family, which I'll get to. And I started getting more and more information about it, and I started really getting the whole story together. And so I've been adding to the webpage ever since. I've been just sort of chronicling this. It's not, I mean, it's been great. It's been fun. It hasn't been a lot of work for me, because what happens is people just send me stuff. They go out and they say, "Oh, you know, we have a moon tree in the park near me. Let me send you a picture of it. Let me send you a picture of the plaque. Let me, you know, here, I found some newspaper clippings about it." So getting all this information, and I just keep compiling it and putting it up, and it's been really great. So let me tell you what I found, and I'll go back, I'll give you the story, and it kind of really starts back in 1953, maybe a little earlier, but Stuart Russo was born in Oklahoma, and he and a friend, I guess this was in 1952, in the summer of 52, decided that they wanted to try to work for the Forest Service up in the Northwest. And so they did. They spent the summer, they both loved nature, and they loved the woods, and they loved, you know, being outdoors. So they spent the summer working for the Forest Service, clearing paths and making the fire breaks and various things like that. Well, the next summer, he decided that he'd heard about, when he was there clearing these fire breaks, he stayed at what was called a smoke jumpers camp. And he just decided this was really cool. And these smoke jumpers now, and if you don't know this, these are guys who, at remote forest fires, they parachute in, because there's really no way to get there in any quick amount of time on trails. I mean, it's just miles and miles away from any transportation. They fly over, they parachute them in with all their equipment, and they fight the fire from. So anyway, you can imagine it's a little crazy, and he just wanted to do this. So he spent the summer of 1953 fighting fires in Oregon, and he was at the Siskiyou Smoke Jumpers base where he received his training, and then he spent the summer fighting fires in Oregon and local, I guess Washington and Idaho, when the fires popped up. So he really developed a love for the Forest Service and just, you know, the forests in general from this. But anyway, he went on to become a test pilot with the Air Force. And after a few years of this, they were looking for astronauts. So he applied to be an astronaut. He said it was a long shot, but he was, you know, he thought he'd give it a try. And sure enough, he got chosen in 1966 in the fifth astronaut class. And then shortly after that, he got chosen for Apollo 14. There is a funny story about that, and that I love, that he tells, and that is that one of the things all the astronauts were worried about was the psychological test. They had to go in and talk to a psychologist, and all the astronauts felt like they could pass all the physical tests. They could do whatever was necessary as far as you know, learning things, memory, intelligence tests, but they were all worried about the psychological test, because they were all afraid that if they said something wrong about, you know, growing up or their mother or something, the psychologist would say, "Oh no, this person is just, you know, they're not fit for astronaut duty because of some strange thing." So apparently he walked in, and the psychologist was looking through his or psychiatrist, I guess, was looking through his record, and he said, "Oh, well, what's this? It says you were a smoke jumper." He says, "Well, what's that?" And apparently Stuart Russo explained what a smoke jumper did. And the guy said, "You know, if you can do that, you can do anything. You're passed." And he said it was the shortest psychological interview for any astronaut. They just kicked him out the door and said, "Yeah, he's fit to be an astronaut. If he can do that, he can pretty much do anything." So I kind of love that story. But anyway, he was chosen for Apollo 14, and what he really wanted to do as part of his mission was pay some tribute to the Forest Service and somehow do something. And he and this fellow at the Forest Service, Stan Krugman, got the idea that he could bring a bunch of tree seeds with him in his personal preference kit on the mission. And then when he got back, give them to the Forest Service. They would grow trees and they plant the trees around, and these would be a tribute both to the Apollo program and the Forest Service. So he did this. And what I'm showing here is, and I've been lucky enough to be in touch with some of the people at the Placerville Forest Service Station in California, and they've gone through a lot of their records. They've sent me stuff. I've gone through the records and kind of put together some of the story of how this worked. And so this is a copy from their records, of their seed accession records, and this is a copy of the seeds that were collected. Redwood seeds. They were designated Lot X. They were collected in 1961 or 2 or something, and stored at the Forest Service. And they pulled seeds from this lot and they sent them to Dr. Walkinshaw, who was in charge of the moon trees from the NASA side. And you can see it says for Lieutenant Commander Roosa. It's misspelled as Roosa, but to take along in Apollo 14. So there's the actual record of them pulling the seeds out and sending them for the mission, which I thought was pretty cool. In any case, Stuart Roosa did bring the seeds. Now, what he's holding in this picture is the little metal canister that they used to store the seeds in, and then he just popped this canister into his personal preference kit. And what they did was they had seeds from a bunch of different trees. I'll get into that in a little bit in a minute. And they stored each collection of seeds in a separate little sealed plastic bag, put it inside the canister, sealed up the canister, stuffed it in his personal preference kit, and then he carried it with him on his trip to the moon. So the seeds stayed with him in the command module, orbited the moon some 50 times during the mission, and there you go. Now, the Apollo 14 mission, you certainly probably don't remember it because of the moon trees, but you may remember it because it followed Apollo 13. So there was a break of over a year, or almost a year, I guess, between Apollo 13 and 14, while they were making sure that they had everything fixed and that Apollo 13 was not going to happen again. So everyone was kind of watching this mission closely just because of that. But the other thing that people really remember, I guess, is that Alan Shepard, who is the commander, shown here along with Ed Mitchell and Stuart Russo on the left, is that Alan Shepard hits a couple of golf balls on the moon, and I think everyone kind of remembers that about the Apollo 14 maybe more than everything else. But in any case, that's the mission where Stuart Russo brought the seeds with him, brought them back, and they already almost right away had a misadventure with these moon seeds, and there are a few of them which I will get to also. But they when they brought everything back, and Apollo 14 was actually the last mission they did this on, they went through a whole quarantine and decontamination procedure. And you may remember on Apollo 11, the astronauts waving through a window. They were in this quarantine facility, this little sort of camper van. Really, what it was a one of these big campers, and they sealed it up, and they took the astronauts straight off, landed them on the Hornet, the aircraft carrier, and marched them right into this quarantine facility, and closed them off and kept them there for a few days to make sure they hadn't brought back any strange thing from the moon. Now, by Apollo 14, they weren't very worried about it. Apollo 14 turned out to be the last mission they did this on. But they did quarantine the astronauts, and they also put everything they brought back with them through this decontamination procedure. And part of that involved putting everything into a vacuum chamber. And unfortunately, what happened was they opened the canister that the seeds were in, to make sure that everything got decontaminated, I guess. And they put them in the vacuum chamber. They pumped it down to a vacuum. And what happened was The seeds were in these sealed plastic bags. They had not been exposed to vacuum before. The plastic bags, because they were under atmospheric pressure, just basically blew up like a balloon and burst. And the seeds went flying all over the vacuum chamber. And you can see here's Stan Krugman, who was the head for the Forest Service of this moon tree project, is describing this, that they exploded, the seeds got all mixed up. So in other words, the seeds had been separated by species, and now we're all mixed together in this vacuum chamber, just all over the place. Well, Stan Krugman said everyone was afraid that the seeds had this had killed them. They never, the sudden decompression had killed them. But Stan Krugman said, no, just collect them all, send them to me, and let's see what we can do. Well, he got all these seeds, hundreds and hundreds of seeds, tiny, tiny seeds. He went through them and separated them by hand by species. And what they did was, then they went and they germinated them. Now, what happened was, unfortunately, this is the second of misadventure they had, was they did try germinating. They turned out that they did germinate okay, but they were doing this in Houston, and they really, at Johnson Space Center, they really did not have the facilities to be growing these trees. And they pretty much all died after about a year. Now, luckily, they only planted maybe half the seeds. They hadn't tried planting them all. So what they did was they took the rest of them, and here's the letter where they actually say they're sending them. They took the seeds and they sent them to a couple Forest Service offices, one in Placerville, California, and one in Gulfport, Mississippi, and to germinate there, where they actually had the facilities. And well, they did. They sent the seeds. Here's the accession record of the seeds, and you can see that they this is the one for the Redwood seeds, but you can see they sent what they had, the seedlings they had left, and then they were grown in Placerville, and they were grown in Gulfport, and there were basically five species of trees that they brought with them. And so we have, they had the Douglas fir, they had loblolly pine. These are just some examples of grown moon trees now that I'm showing. They had sweet gum trees, sycamore, and redwoods. And what they did was they grew these things and into all these little seedlings. And in 1976, they distributed them all over the country. The idea being for the bicentennial. And so what they had were a whole bunch of planting celebrations for the bicentennial. What I'm showing here is a planting bicentennial celebration they did at Washington Square in Philadelphia. This was the first official moon tree planting that they had. And Stuart Roosa is on the top two pictures. On the leftmost picture, he's on the farthest left, and on the rightmost picture at the top, he's at the right. And so he took part in the ceremony planting this moon tree in Philadelphia. Sadly, that one has since died, but these celebrations went on all over the country. And so a lot of them were in places like these, Washington Square. A lot of them were state capitals. A lot of them were tiny little parks and local places, and they basically got sent out to different states and planted, wherever the governor or whoever where they put in charge of it decided. Some places had little contests. Maybe elementary schools, children would write an essay, and they picked the best one, and that school would get a moon tree. They sent roughly 3 to most states. Some states got more for various reasons, but the one in Philadelphia, unfortunately, sadly, has since died. They planted a second generation one in the spot where this one was, but this is part of the celebration. They had a plaque set in a rock right next to the tree, and they had a little a brochure that went with it, and having the whole celebration. But this is the kind of stuff that I would get, is people would send this. There was a library in Washington Square, and they had saved this stuff, and they sent me copies of what they had, and people went to it and said, oh, I saw the moon tree in Washington Square, and here's a picture that I took. And so I can basically made the moon trees and this, and I'd get this information from all sorts of sources. People would send me a clipping because they either remember planting the moon tree or whatever. It was in a brochure. People took pictures of plaques or signs on the moon trees. That's the kind of stuff I would get and could put the story together. And all the moon trees have their own little stories. And I'm just gonna I guess I'll just go through a few of these and you know, let you know. So I will start with, and this is actually one of the things that touched me the most, and one of my favorite stories turns out to be your nearest tree in Atchison. It's at the International Forest of Friendship, which is basically a tribute to aviators. And what they did was they planted a moon tree there. You can see it's American sycamore. Around the base of it, you can see that there's little stones, and they all have names of astronauts. So these are tributes to all the astronauts who've passed away around this tree. And yeah, you see it's a nice big healthy tree. A lot of people visit it. After I'd been doing this for, I don't know, a few years, and I was getting more and more information on various moon trees. I got the following email. So you can see, I'm grateful for the work you've done put into this project. You see, Stuart Russo was my dad. This is from Jack Roosa. I took my kids to see one of the moon trees in Atchison, Kansas. I was really touched. The pictures weren't with the letter. I added those in, but I'll tell you about those in a minute. But the email I got was just very touching. I was very excited. I was actually hearing from Jack, from Stuart Roush's son, Jack, and I just thought, that was amazing to me. I since then have been in touch with the family. So here's a picture of, well, on the right is a picture of Stuart Roosa is sort of in the center, and those are his kids, his four children, 3 sons and a daughter. And later on the left-hand side, they had actually, the family set up a tribute, a moon tree, second generation moon tree planting at the Arlington National Cemetery. And so there's his family now. That's on the far left is his wife, and then that's Jack, his son Jack is sitting next to her, second to the left. And then another one of his sons and his daughter Rosemary, and then his son Christopher is actually talking at the moment that picture's taken. So his whole family was there at this dedication. And he sadly died in 1994. But it was very, very exciting to hear from them, and then to get to know the family, and then hearing stories about Stuart Russo, which are some great stories. Especially, I spent a lot of time with Christopher Russo and heard these stories. So anyway, that tree. I will tell you that here's a letter I got. Glenn Kovar was also one of the main people involved in the Forest Service with this, and he sent me a copy of this letter that he got from Stuart Russo, where he was suggesting that they would plant one of the trees at the Siskiyou Smoke Jumpers base. And in fact, they did that. They went to the Smoke Jumpers base, they planted a tree there, and they actually had a whole thing around it. They would have a moon tree run there every year, and they would have various things. The base sadly closed, and unfortunately the moon tree died. Because there was no one there left to take care of it. But it has since been reopened, and now it is the Siskiyou Smoke Jumpers Museum. They've fixed up the buildings, the old buildings, the bunkhouse, and I haven't been there. I've seen pictures of it, but it looks like an amazing place to visit. If you're ever in Oregon, I would suggest it. And they've planted a second generation moon tree there as well. So they do have their own second generation moon tree growing at the Siskiyou Smoke Jumpers base. Which was where Stuart Russo trained. They also sort of couched this thing to be an experiment. It wasn't really. It was really a public relations. But they said, oh, we want to have a control tree, and we want to save seeds and have control trees and plant the moon tree seeds next to them and see if there's any difference, because they've been in space, they've been in weightlessness, they've been exposed to radiation. That sort of thing. No one really expected there to be any difference, and there really wasn't. But one of the funny stories is at the Palustris Experimental Forest in Louisiana, they did plant, supposedly planted a moon tree seed next to a control tree seed, and to see how they grew. The experimental forest sort of closed down sometime after that. But it was still being maintained. Although this picture now showing the 2 moon trees or the moon tree and the control, quote unquote, control tree, uh, is now that a lot of that has been overgrown and stuff. But the trees are still there. But it turns out that one of the people from the Forest Service went to look at them not too long ago and realized that the two trees were different species. So somehow they managed to plant the wrong control tree seed. In other words, the tree that's the moon tree is the right tree, but the control tree seed, they planted the wrong type of seed next to it, apparently. And so they grew next to each other. The fellow who discovered this, found this, wrote a little article about it, and joked that he said they may. He said it's possible that there would be some effects or some changes in the seeds because they went into space, but he doubted that it would have changed species. So there you go. In any case, that is the one sort of control experiment that I know about, and it actually wasn't a very good one. But as far as we know, and as far as anyone can tell, there is no difference between the moon trees and trees that have never been grown from seeds that have never been to space. But they're cool in their own right, I guess. Okay, so anyway, here's one of my favorites, the one at Goddard Spaceflight Center. There's a picture of when it was first planted at Goddard, and they've actually there's a new sign up now, and they've rebuilt some stuff around the tree. But I guess one of the funniest things about this tree was I had my moon tree page up for, I don't know, maybe a year, or almost a year. I got a phone call from someone at Goddard, and they said, "Well, why don't you have the Goddard moon tree on your moon tree page?" And I was like, I didn't know there was a Goddard moon tree, but sure enough, there was. It's off to the side of the visitor center. It's really not. It's not near a sidewalk. It's not near anything that you'd walk by. So no one really knew. Most people didn't know about it. I didn't know about it. I tell people that's why I'm planetary scientist and not running a detective agency. But sure enough, there was a moon tree there, and now I've moved offices to a spot where I can almost see it from where my office window is. That's how close I am to it. Anyway, that was that was rather funny, and yeah, a little bit humbling, I guess. Holliston, Massachusetts, they planted a tree there. It's in front of the police station, and they decided that that would be the safest place to plant the moon tree, would be in front of the police station. But they did something that a lot of places did with the moon tree, and that is the tree itself, the seedling, when they got it, was very young, very small, and very frail. And so what they did was they actually, for the ceremony, planted a stand-in. They had another seedling, another sycamore seedling that they had, and they planted the stand-in seedling because they weren't sure. They didn't think the seedling itself, it needed to be in a greenhouse maybe for a few more years to get healthy enough to actually be planted outside. So they planted this, like I said, in front of the police station. It has this, the picture on the left is what it looked like. This is some years later, but they had a fence around it and the whole thing. Well, turns out a week or so after it was planted, it was stolen from in front of the police station. They never did find out who stole the tree, but what they stole, thinking it was a moon tree, was actually the stand-in tree. And so so what they did later on, a few years later, when the tree was healthy and bigger, they did plant the tree, and I guess kept a better eye on it, because now you can see the picture on the right is the actual moon tree in front of the police station in Holliston, Massachusetts. Let's say, so I don't want to forget the redwoods. There's the beautiful redwoods. They're all planted in California because redwoods have a very small growing area. And I guess that's one thing I should have said. They tried to pick trees that could grow in all various different climates and different types of conditions. So the redwoods were probably the most specialized ones because they really have a limited thing. But again, redwoods are impressive because they're big. And this is one that I've actually visited in San Luis Obispo. It's just a beautiful big redwood tree. And again, a lot of them have these plaques with them. And I don't want to forget the Douglas firs. There are quite a few Douglas firs These are ones that I have not found very many of. They were planted all over the Northwest. They were planted in Montana and Idaho and Wyoming, and I have records of them being sent to all the states basically, but I found very few of them, so I'm not quite sure what happened. But the records weren't kept well, and that's been part of the problem. I believe there's still a lot of moon trees, hundreds probably. I found, other people have found, like I say, other people have been really doing all the work. About 70 that are still alive, and about 35 that have died from various things. You know, many of them just normal tree mortality. Some of them just cut down because people didn't realize what they were, and they were cut down for whatever, you know, building a parking lot because of some project that was being done there. Usually when people know about them, they try to build around them, and there are a lot of places where they have altered the construction plans to account for the moon tree being there. But this is one anyway that was planted at Oregon State University, and one that I actually have a picture of the original planting, so you can see the original seedling when it was planted and how it looks today. And the other nice thing is they were planted at places that, you know, you've never heard of, little towns, little parks. Cootersport, Pennsylvania, they had a little celebration a year or so ago for their moon tree on the 50th anniversary of Apollo 14, and I got to take part in that, you know, virtually, and it was a lot of fun. They had a whole, you know, old people there. They had a little party and a little celebration of their moon tree, and it's one of the things that I think is really special about the trees is how they are not just at the state capitals, you know, not just planted at you know, big places like that, but also just in little towns, some elementary schools or little parks and little museums got these things too. And I've got the whole list of these on my moon trees page. And it turns out not only in the United States, they actually sent them to other countries as well. Haven't found very many of these. This is one that I found about actually fairly recently. They gave one to a group of French Rotarians at a meeting in Louisiana, and they brought it back to France. Unfortunately, the seedling did not do well on the trip, and it died. So they don't have it. It was planted at the Chateau Lafayette, which was Lafayette's home in France. And you know, it was in honor of the American Revolution and the French participation in that. But that tree unfortunately has died. However, they did send 3 of them to Brazil, and those are all alive. There's a picture of one basically today. There's a picture of another one that they at the planting. These were planted in 1980, so the seedlings are a little bit bigger. They grow a little bit more, and probably made them able to make the trip, you know, a little better, survive the trip a little better. And then actually, one fellow built a giant model of the Saturn V to put next to the moon tree, one of the moon trees in Brazil, which is another redwood. And there's a whole story that goes with that redwood too, that particular one, about how they planted it in a bad spot. Other trees were growing around it and it was dying, and one guy came along and found out that it was dying. One of the reasons it was dying was because there were a bunch of street lights around it, and the redwoods need to have a dark time. In other words, they can't be lit up all night and all day, because they need dark time in order to thrive. And they weren't getting it. The guy went and complained to the city hall and to the whatever department was in charge, and said, you know, these lights are killing the tree. They're on all night. Can you please turn them off? Well, we can't turn them off. We can't turn them off. He went out. He actually went out and got a I can't remember what it was, a BB gun or a slingshot. And he just went and took out the lights. He broke all the lights. He waited till they came back and fixed the lights, and he went and he broke them again. And he just kept doing this over the course of a year. The tree started doing better. Meanwhile, he had them cut back on the other trees, and finally they gave up trying to fix the lights, and they just turned them off. I mean, they just don't have the lights anymore. The tree got to be healthier and healthier, and now is a big, healthy redwood tree. But it was just near death. Um, so some people have taken drastic measures for the trees also, which I guess I can appreciate. Anyway, those are just some of the stories that go with these. I really, and I would like to end with a picture of the first class. So this is the class in Kendallton, Indiana, that started the Moon Tree Project, and this is them next to the tree in Kendallton, Indiana. And I did get to go there. They had a little dedication for their moon tree a few years later, after we all found out about them. And Christopher Russo actually went there with me, one of Stuart Roussa's sons, and that was great fun. And then when they had the planting in Arlington, which is on the so obviously the left side is the tree in Kendallton, and when they had the tree planting in at Arlington National Cemetery, Joan got the class together, and a few of them, pictured here, a little bit older, came to the tree planting ceremony and helped plant the tree. And that is Joan in the center, the teacher who started everything. And we all got to be involved in planting this tree at Arlington National Cemetery, which is now a beautiful sycamore tree at Arlington. And I guess that is all I've got. So well, I'll turn it back over to Eric, and thank you very much for listening.
Well, thank you for a wonderful presentation. I learned quite a bit myself listening to your talk, and I'm glad you put that slide up, because I was going to mention, I just had a glimpse of it when you started your PowerPoint slide. I love that. I love that poster. A poster of the solar system.
Oh yeah. Oh, I can. I guess I don't know if I can put that up again real quick. Yeah, that is. So that is the poster that I had hanging on my wall when I was a little kid, right next to my bed, and my parents saved it and gave it to me, and I still have it, and it still reminds me of just sort of everything. When I was a kid, I was just a little nerd and loved space and planets.
It set your career in motion.
And it kind of did, I always look at this thing and I said, yeah, maybe this is one of the things that led to this. So yeah.
I love the artwork at the bottom.
I do too. It's a beautiful poster. Thanks.
But back to moon trees. If you have a question for Dr. Williams, you'll see a Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen. Type your questions in there. If you're watching on Facebook, type your questions in the comments section, and we'll get to as many as we can between now and the top of the hour. It looks like we have a few questions already. I also should mention, my colleague Samantha asked you in chat, have you seen a moon tree? Let us know if you've seen one. I have seen one up in Atchison. But yeah, let us know kind of where you're watching from and if you've seen a moon tree. We'll begin with Francisco. He asked, why was Apollo 14 the last mission that allowed an astronaut to bring something to space and back to Earth? That was the last mission that had a post-flight quarantine, right?
Right. So, so maybe I may not have explained that well. Right. The first missions, because they didn't really know. No one really expected anything, but you don't know. They were a little worried that maybe there was something on the moon, some kind of a virus or bug or bacteria or something that would be dangerous to humans. And so what they did was they quarantined the astronauts for Apollo 11, Apollo 12, Apollo 14. By the time Apollo 14 came along, of course, they'd had lunar samples now for a very long time. For a couple of years now, they've been examining them very, very closely. They realized by that time that there was no danger of contamination. There was nothing living on the moon. There was just absolutely no chance at all. So following Apollo 14, they didn't quarantine the astronauts. Or they didn't go through any decontamination procedures. They landed. They splashed down. They got onto their aircraft carrier, and they were out in the open, free to go. And they didn't they didn't do anything with any of the stuff. So that's what that was about. Yeah. So I'm sorry if I didn't explain that well.
But astronauts on Apollo 15, 16, and 17, they also took stuff to the moon and brought it back. And
They all had personal preference kits. There was a famous thing on Apollo 15, I think, where they brought some stamps and sold them to a collector, and then there was
got them in a little trouble. Yeah.
They got in trouble for that. Right. So, but yes, they still did do that, and some of them some of them left pictures on the surface of the moon and that sort of thing. So all sorts of interesting things went in those personal preference kits. Although I think the moon tree seeds were the best.
I think so too. I believe you touched on this. We have a question: did the travel of the seeds to the moon and back affect the quality of the trees? In any
apparently not.
Way? Yeah.
Right. So apparently not. As best they can tell, there's nothing different about these trees, and they didn't really expect there to be. If you kept a seed in space, especially a deep space, which is where the Apollo missions were, you might expect the radiation to have some effect on them over some time. But the missions, they were short. They were only out there for a few days, a week or so. And so they weren't really exposed to the kind of conditions that might possibly change them, and apparently did not.
All right, another question. Are people allowed to get seeds from any of these moon trees, or do you need permission? People may want to have their own second generation moon trees.
Yes, no, right. In fact, I have one in my backyard.
Nice.
And yep. And we planted a couple second generations around Goddard. And in fact, just a few days ago, the big, beautiful tree in front of my building was taken down by this monster storm we had. And so I was talking to them about planting a moon tree in its place, a second generation moon tree. Anyway, the moon trees they're basically owned by wherever they are. And most places don't care. We've collected seed pods from the tree at Goddard. Anyone can go and do that. You'd probably want to ask at the visitor center before you did that, because they'd be, But again, actually, if the seed pods fell on the ground, you could just go pick them up yourself. And it depends on the place, really. But you are certainly allowed to do that. There is nothing. NASA, the Forest Service, doesn't have any official ownership of the moon trees or anything like that. So wherever the tree is planted, you would want to talk to the people, the Topton Mini Museum, or whatever the park is, or whatever the state capitol building. You'd want to talk to someone, the groundskeepers or something, about if that's okay. They also are growing seedlings that you can buy from. There's a tree at Mississippi State University, and they have collected seeds over the years from that, and they're growing trees. There's a place called American Forests. If you go to the website, they sell moon tree seedlings. Second generation seedlings that they've already actually grown and are known to be healthy. It's difficult to grow from seed, but those are sycamores. So you may want a Douglas fir, you may want a loblolly pine, you may want something different. Check the website. You can find out where the closest one is to you, and you can see if you can get hold of seeds and see if you can get something growing.
And we dropped that website in the chat. You'll see it there, and you scroll down, you'll see the list of where the trees are located. And it's a pretty extensive list. How many trees out there do you think are first generation trees that haven't been identified yet? What's your best guess?
Yes. Well, now, lately I've gotten hold of some of the documentation, and I have to thank the folks at Placerville U.S. Forest Service office, because they've gone and they've scanned a lot of the documents, and then I've been talking to them. I've gone through them, and I've kind of got to put together a lot more of the story from these documents. They only covered the redwoods and the Douglas firs. It looks like there's one redwood that's not accounted for. There's a lot of Douglas firs that are not accounted for. Now, as far as the other trees that were grown at Gulfport, I don't have a good idea. They took maybe 400 seeds with them, and I'm guessing roughly 200 of them were attempted to grow and died. I was talking about how the ones died because they're grown in Houston without the proper facilities. So I'm to say another 200, but then they made root cuttings from those. So there's a few others, first generation trees. I'm guessing there's between 50 and 100 out there
Wow.
Really, really rough guess that we don't know about. I don't know how many of those are still alive. Also, my guess is that a lot of them aren't found because they tried to plant them, then they died. I mean, the mortality rate of trees from seedlings is pretty high. A lot can go wrong, and so it may well be that a lot of them have died and without any any fanfare because well, it died. We're not going to leave a plaque there. We're not going to leave. So I don't know. 50 to 100, I'm guessing.
But yeah, that's a lot of trees.
Oh yeah. No. There's still Now, of course, all the easiest ones have been found. So the only way I think to find these other ones is come across an old newspaper clipping, for example, that for the bicentennial celebration, our town is going to plant this moon tree and blah blah blah. Or someone who remembers, but it's getting harder and harder, right, to find people. But I do have people who have written to me and sent me stuff who remember, who were at these plantings and remembered. One fellow was actually a Cub Scout. He took part in the planting. The one at Washington Square actually sent me news clippings showing him as a little Cub Scout helping to plant the tree, and told me, and he wrote a whole story about his memories of planting the tree, which is also up on the website, which is a great story and it's really fun.
Yeah, those are fun. So
there is that. Yeah,
I can imagine there being several elementary schools out there that receive trees and
right,
exactly. Since been forgotten, and there's this huge sycamore there on the school grounds that
no one knows. Exactly. I'm sure they're out there. I just don't know how they may never be found.
And getting back to the earlier question about permission to gather seedlings, this has been a couple of years ago, but I contacted the Forest of Friendship in Atchison, Kansas, and asked them if it was okay if I went and picked up some seed pods, and they said sure, no problem. And I did that. My tree didn't survive though, so I need to make a return trip up there. So yeah, I think kind of to your point, it just depends on the owner of the park or whatever that has the tree. But I think most of them would be agreeable to it. Got a question from Carl. Apart from France and Brazil, are you aware of any other international donations of moon trees?
So yes, that's a good question. Supposedly they sent a tree or maybe a few trees to Japan. The Japanese emperor was here to visit or something, and they sent trees back. But I haven't heard a single thing about it. So I don't. That was written in an article that I saw. One of the first things I saw actually about one of the first things I saw about the moon trees was something about them sending a moon tree to Japan, but no luck finding it. Now I have to say that for me, this is really a sidelight. I mean we're all encouraged to do outreach and education and public outreach stuff. And NASA is part of our jobs, but it's really only supposed to be a tiny percentage of your job. So I don't have any resources. I don't have any money to do this. It's not like I can, go to Japan and try to hunt down this moon tree. And so I really do count on other people, but I have not heard it. So I haven't heard. Now we have a bunch of second generation trees planted all over Europe, actually. Rosemary Roosa has gone and planted a bunch of second generation trees, sort of in honor of her father, and I just got invited to bring some seeds from the Goddard tree to the Arboretum in Padua, Italy, which is celebrating its 800th anniversary this year, which is amazing to me, and it's the oldest arboretum in Europe. And I also then, as part of that, was asked to if I could bring some seeds to the Vatican Observatory. And so I'm actually going to get to go visit the Vatican Observatory in a few months. Nice. And meet the Vatican astronomer and see the papal summer residence and present them with some moon tree seeds. So that's pretty exciting. Yeah,
that sounds like a wonderful trip.
Yeah.
We have a question from Beth. She wants to know, who is Barbara Scott, who planted the Goddard moon tree? What's the significance of her having that honor to plant the tree?
Oh, she was a scientist at Goddard. I don't know specifically, actually. So you got me. I don't know what she did.
Okay.
You know what? But I'm going to look that up now, because now that is a good question. That's a fair question, and I just don't know. I got that out of an old Goddard newsletter, and you know, the picture and the little blurb, and that was basically all there was about it. But no, yeah, I should have done that. I'll have to do that.
I wasn't sure if she was a scientist at Goddard, but I thought maybe she was related to perhaps Dave Scott, the Apollo 15 astronaut, and I Googled that, and that wasn't the case. So.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, that, you know what? That's funny. That didn't occur to me. That is possible. They
Different
did,
mission, but colleagues.
yeah. Well, yeah. No, and that's a good point. Throughout the bicentennial, they did get a lot of the Apollo astronauts to plant the trees, you know, to take part in the tree plantings. They would get, so I know that Ed Mitchell and Harrison Schmitt told me, he was Apollo 17. He told me he took part in the moon tree planting or two in New Mexico. But he just said he didn't remember much about it. He remembered that he had done it.
He was there.
And so, yeah. So it is definitely, yeah, that wouldn't be out of the question, but I think you're right. I think it was a scientist at Goddard.
Another question, of the trees that are still alive, which species are the most plentiful?
Sycamores. Definitely seems like sycamores. I guess I'm not terribly surprised, because it has the widest range, first of where it can grow, and it is one of the hardier types of trees. But I would have to say, and I guess, you know, it's another thing. I suppose I haven't counted through the list, but I could almost definitely say it's sycamore. Sycamore trees are the most common. It's absolutely the most common second generation tree. I know that.
Michael asked a question. It was answered earlier. Are the trees growing in any way differently than the trees have not gone to the moon? And you had said they're,
yeah, right. No glowing tentacles. No. But yeah, no, they seem to be the same.
And Judy has a comment, or actually Pete has a comment. So he writes, "Fascinating, thank you." And then Judy saw a second generation tree in Philadelphia last fall. She had no idea what a moon tree was. And so thank you. She thanks you for explaining it to her.
Well, thank you.
And I've got another monitor here. I'm looking to my right. Tom on Facebook writes that I have 2 moon tree canisters. One has been opened. The other remains unopened. Are the seeds contained in the canister still viable? Oh,
is this something from like American forests, or?
I don't know, Tom, if you're watching, if you could let us know, like, where you got the canisters from.
The short answer is they should probably be, but it probably depends on the conditions they've been, you know, kept in. They really should be in a cool, dry place, and I think under those conditions they would last for you know, quite some time. But again, I don't know if we're talking about, you know, 2 years or 10 years. I'm not. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, let us know how long you have them there, Tom. And,
I just give it a try. I mean, I would try them, whatever they are, try them.
Yeah. All right, we have time for a couple more questions. If you're watching on Zoom via Splash, you'll see a Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen. If you're on Facebook, type your questions in the comments section. Yep, Tom writes, they have been in my family. So I think he's had them for quite a while.
Oh, okay. Well, I would, no harm in trying it, I guess. Yeah, I would give it a try.
And yeah, he says they're original seeds, so there could be a lot of them in there, right? And,
well, then, I'd be interested to know where they're from. You know, I mean, original seeds. I wonder where he got them from. I'd be really curious.
Hey, Tom, I'll drop a link to the Moon Trees webpage.
Yeah, yeah, my
And-
contact information is right there.
And Dr. Williams' contact information is there. So let me do that.
And probably even if you just Googled moon trees, you'd get it. You get it pretty quickly. There's not a whole lot of pages on moon trees, so
Yeah, that's true.
it's pretty easy to find. If you put moon trees and Dave Williams or something like that.
Well, and you mentioned something that's interesting too. I'm glad you mentioned it, that researching the moon trees isn't part of your normal day-to-day job. It's not in your job description to do that. You just happen to get that email, and
that's right. Yeah,
it sparked a little curiosity and an interest, and it's taking you down this path, and it's going to take you to Italy.
Yeah, I know.
Wow,
I mean, right. I never would have guessed, that I'd be involved in this. I got to meet all the Rousas. They're a wonderful family, and heard all sorts of stories, and met all these folks in the Forest Service who, been involved in this, and so yeah, it's been great.
And being invited to give talks about it. And
That's right. That's right. I always have something to talk about, when I'm at a party and they say, "What do you do?" "Oh, well, let me talk about this moon tree." So yeah, no, it's really just fascinating. I mean, I've just enjoyed every minute of it.
It is fascinating, and I encourage everyone to go to that webpage, find a tree nearest you. There's probably one within driving distance from where you live. So more than likely, you'll have a good chance of seeing a moon tree. Thank you, Dr. Williams, for a fascinating talk. I've been looking forward to this for a while now, and I loved hearing about the story of the moon trees. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks for having me. It's been great fun. I was looking forward to it too. So thank you, Eric.